Brett Bauer here, and I'm in Venice, California on a kind of semi-gloomy day, which is odd for us, Doom Gloom. And I'm with the creator and director and the man behind the fascinating Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Trophy Kids, and Prescription Thugs, Chris Bell. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to actually talk to you because I know you on a personal level, and I've seen you in the gym for many years now and all the work that you've done, but I think it's really fascinating, your story and what is going on in your life and how far you've come, because you've had a dramatic and insane transformation. And I know that very well, how difficult and challenging it can be. So I wanted to dig a little deep and learn more about your story that people might not know.
Yeah, I think a lot of time when you put yourself in front of the camera and put yourself out there, you think that people might know everything going on in your life. But what people didn't know behind the scenes when I was doing Bigger, Stronger, Faster, I had a struggle with alcohol back then that went back like a long time. I never really talked about it or ever really told anybody about it. But it started with alcohol when I was like 20 years old. First time I ever went to a party, I ended up getting like so hammered, my friend dropped me off on the lawn because he didn't want to deal with the repercussions of like what my parents would say. And you should know, like usually people know, like if they're an alcoholic or a drug addict, they know the first time they actually pick up a drink or a drug because something bad happens. Mm-hmm. And if you're the type of person where you go out often and something bad happens, you need to go to rehab because before the shit hits the fan, And so for me, it was time to go. It was time to make a major change in my life. And what was going on was I had a hip replacement surgery, and the hip replacement surgery had gotten me addicted to prescription painkillers. And so I was on that roller coaster for quite a while. Got to a point where I almost died several times on that.
Which is crazy because it is a silent killer, like what you mentioned in your movie, where how many people had passed away from overuse of narcotics?
52,000 people in 2015.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
So what happened to me was, so I already had like this alcoholic tendency, but when I found pills, I completely stopped drinking. I was like, this is amazing. Like I can, So then I completely stopped drinking for like months and months and months. But then I discovered that you could mix the pills and the alcohol and get like double the effect. Mm-hmm. And that was really dangerous because the first time I ever did that, I woke up in the hospital. But because at the time I was in the Directors Guild, I had really good insurance, I woke up in the hospital, took a cab back home and went out drinking that night because there was no consequence to it. It was like, well, big deal. I ended up, I don't even think I told my friends, like, oh, hey, guess what happened last night? It was just, and that's pretty bad. Like, if you end up, you don't remember last night and you end up waking up in a hospital and then you just take a cab and go home back, and you don't even question what happened. You're not like let me go back and like recount the steps. Like, you don't even question it. So that's where my life was. And needless to say, that's not a good spot to be every day. And it was just time to get out of that and transition back into what I was, which, like, when you met me, like, I was a guy that liked to go to the gym and train and throw around some weights and, have fun doing that. So I just wanted to get back to what I knew I was. I just sort of went off the beaten path for a while because of depression and a million other things.
Yeah, but it's so common. I know we've talked about it before where it's so many people have, and I meet this a lot too in Gold's Gym, where a lot of people have addictive personality. So whether they were addicted to being in relationships back to back to back, or they were an alcoholic, or it was food. So many people that I've met in Gold's, they all came from something else, and they kind of put that addictive personality and behavior into training. Yeah. I know I was one of them too, and
some people still do all of it. Some people are like addicted to steroids, addicted to cocaine, and addicted to lifting, and you'll see them in the gym just going crazy. Usually like 4 a.m. or something. But there's all types in the gym. But I think you're right. Like, it definitely does attract people that like have that personality. So in a good way, I think a lot of people are there venting out their energy. So hopefully the people there are positive, putting positive energy, back into the gym. And I think that anytime anybody's like working out or trying to get in shape, it's going to be it's going to be positive. So you just got to make sure that you don't go to that other side where it becomes unhealthy, where you're way too obsessed with the gym, and then that becomes, an unhealthy struggle, and we don't want that either. So you got to be careful to balance.
Oh yeah, and balance is actually the hardest thing. Being an extreme person myself, it's either feast or famine. So it's like I'll either go extreme this way and I'll diet hard, or I'll go the opposite way and I'll put on 20 pounds.
If you're an addict, you know where they say the best place to be is? The closest that you could possibly be to death without dying is where an addict wants to be, right? So for people that are extreme, it's either that or nothing at all, because they'd rather just chill.
Yeah, it's more uncomfortable to be balanced.
Yeah, people feel weird. Like, I feel weird. Everything's balanced. Everything's okay.
Yeah, it's not just a challenge. It's kind of like those people that are addicted to those relationships that have so much drama in them.
Yeah,
because you always question, why do you stay in that? But it's the same type of behavior.
Yeah, sometimes we need that, to pull us out. For me, like the biggest thing for me was like just changing. Like the hardest part about changing was just the fact that you have to really agree with yourself and be honest with yourself that you're done with what you're doing. And so for like the longest time, I was like, well, I want to quit doing pills and I want to quit drinking, but then I got to stop doing pills.
Yeah.
And I really like this feeling that I have right now, And so I really didn't want to quit. Like they felt great. It felt good because it took me out of pain and it took me somewhere else. And so that was my biggest problem, was like when I got done with the painkillers and when I got done with the alcohol, the biggest problem was I still was in a lot of pain. And so the thing I did for that was I started taking kratom. And I found kratom's a natural, for people that don't know, it's a natural plant that basically works like an opiate, but it's not an opiate. It's about as addictive as coffee. So we don't have the problems with death and respiratory depression and all the other problems we see with opiates. So like having something like kratom for me is a lifesaver. So I'm making a documentary about that, because now I feel like all these people that watch Prescription Thugs and said they liked it, now what do they do?
Right.
They watch Prescription Thugs and they know to stay away from drugs, right? So what do they do when they're in pain? Say, oh yeah, I watched Chris's movie and forget it, I'm not going to take that. We need to give them somewhere else to go. So this movie, tentatively titled A Leaf of Faith, is about kratom, which is a leaf, a plant, that basically, like I said, I think can solve this opiate epidemic, which is a pretty big thing to say. We lost 52,000 people to opiates in 2015, and to say that we can get rid of that is huge. But if you look back to when polio was eradicated, there was millions and millions of cases of polio. I think there's like 6 or 7 million cases of polio. And in a matter of like 10 years, they brought that number from millions and millions down to like 186, down to like 15, down to like 0. You know what I mean? And like, so in 1 year, it went from like millions to like 186, and then the next year went from 186 to like 15, and from 15 like to 0. Right. So like, there's no reason why we can't eradicate these deaths. We have to start evaluating the drugs that are on the market and how we give them to people and how they get into people's hands. And, we have to evaluate all these things if we actually care about people.
Right, and what's really fascinating too with the whole kratom thing is that I've tried it myself when I had a hip injury and coming off of medication, because I was having the opposite effects, where it was that vicious cycle where they would make me so wired that I couldn't fall asleep at night. So then I had to take another pill to go to sleep at night. So I was just constantly going like this.
Sure.
And the kratom actually did help not only with my pain, but with my anxiety that I was getting and the depression too. So there are other benefits to taking that as well besides dealing with pain, correct?
Yeah, it helps a lot with mental, like just being alert. A lot of people say it helps them like a good cup of coffee. And so that's, even that's important. Just feeling good is important. I think we've put such a focus in, like if you feel sick, like if you have a stomach ache, nobody ever questions you taking like Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah.
But like, if you feel bad and you wanted to like smoke a joint to feel better, that's somehow like that's not cool. But if you felt bad and you wanted to pop a Xanax, and you're like, that's what all the housewives in Beverly Hills are doing, and they're all walking around high, and that's acceptable. So like what we accept, I think, is starting to change. I think people are more accepted to marijuana and that kind of thing. But I think that should even be more accepted because it's actually safer than the drugs that people are taking, otherwise. Right. So when we open our mind and we start looking at drugs in a different way, I think like in Prescription Thugs, we talk about, all these pharmaceutical drugs, but on the flip side, all of these illicit drugs like MDMA and ayahuasca are now being used, and ketamine are being used in the treatment of depression.
Right.
So, like, we've had it all backwards for a really long time, and I need to reassess, I would say. I don't like claim that I have the answer or claim that like I know what the answer is. I just know that we need to reassess the drug situation in this country.
Right. Well, it's really interesting too because anything that takes off in a market, usually the pharmaceutical industry comes in and tries to gobble it up and bans it. I know in the sports nutrition industry it's happened a ton of times too once they find something that is really hot and is working.
Yeah.
So do you think with the Kratom, do you think that might become an issue where that might get banned and they might have to start writing prescriptions for it as well?
Yeah, they tried back in October, the government tried to ban Kratom. They issued like an intent to ban, and then I think by December, enough noise was made in the government, and I was part of that. I was one of the people coming out saying like, hey, I don't think that they should ban this. And I used my voice and my influence to do things like go on Joe Rogan's podcast and things like that to get people to go on the websites and comment. And through Joe Rogan's podcast and through people like Trey Crowder, who's a stand-up comedian who did a YouTube video, had like 300,000 views on it, saying to go and talk to your congressman, sign the petition, all these things of activism. It's great. Everybody sort of came together, and the DEA, for the first time ever, that we're going to schedule a drug, backed off and said, hey, we're going to reassess this. Now we're going to allow people to comment on it. So people were commenting on it, and back in January, I think, I went on Joe Rogan's podcast. Or maybe it was late November. They were going to ban it like December 1st. They were going to make an announcement or something. And they had like 7,000 comments. And then that's the day I went on Joe Rogan's podcast. And then next day after we went on Rogan's podcast, it went from 7,000 up to 23,000 comments. So people listened to the podcast, and they went on to the website and they commented. So it shows you that people like that have power, being able to utilize Joe's program to keep something like Kratom legal is kind of an amazing power that we have. We live in an amazing time where things like that are possible,
Right.
And so to me, I think it's important that we don't make other things illegal, especially drugs, because it's just so stupid to throw somebody in jail. We have so many people now in jail for drugs. I think when, the prison population is out of control, and it's mainly because of drugs, and the only way to fix it is stop putting people in jail because of drugs, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just dumb.
Yeah.
Especially taking, if we look at a big problem in America, it's parenting. Huge problem, parenting. So why have a lot of these kids been taken away from their parents? It's like, well, because of drugs. Now, like, if you're a parent, like, yeah, you shouldn't be selling drugs, but we got to think of better ways around it than like throwing somebody in prison for the rest of their life, for having some marijuana or whatever. Like, we just got to think of better ways around it.
I know, but the one thing that is kind of scary that you think about with, obviously the money that's in the pharmaceutical industry is that, do you think they would ban it and make it seem that it would be unhealthy for you because obviously they make money off of people being sick and taking more pharmaceutical drugs?
Pharmaceutical industry does that a lot. Like with marijuana, for example, they've put out a lot of money in order to try to stop marijuana from becoming legal in certain states. I know that's proven. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. As far as Kratom goes, there's no big scam or big scandal. There's no. I know a lot of people like to say like, oh yeah, pharma is there. They're there and they're pumping the brakes on this thing, and it's just not true. One of the guys that actually owns a patent for using Kratom for opiate withdrawals is a guy that is a professor at University of Ole Miss, and his name's Christopher McCurdy, and he's a doctor who would love to see this be turned into a pharmaceutical drug and be used, to help a lot of people. he's all for keeping it legal. He doesn't want to see it banned because then he can't further study it. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem is that, and the sad thing is, the really sad thing is that no pharmaceutical company sees this as like a smart option. Like, they're looking, you know what I mean? Like, the reason why they don't want, like, because if somebody was smart, they would take over Kratom. They would be like, they would do whatever they could to, I guess what Dr. McCurdy was saying is like, there's not, because it's been around for so long, it's hard to like patent the plant or whatever. You can't like patent it. Right. So that's what he's saying is like pharma can't get in there and like patent it and make it their own. But like, if they could figure out a way to make something out of Kratom, like using Kratom as the basis to make something out of that can stop this opiate epidemic, they're going to make a shitload of money. You know, they might stop the epidemic that's been, you know, their gravy train for like a long time, but they're going to make a lot of money in stopping that, and they'll figure out, you know, some other disease will come along.
Do you think they would make less money, though, because people wouldn't be addicted and taking more pills and having the domino effect?
I just don't think people at pharma companies should be money-balling people's health, like, to figure out, like, what's more, you know, we're going to make more money if this many people die or this many people die. I think we should just be doing what's right, you know.
I know. And it would be great if things did work that way.
It just never works that way,
everything's about money these days, which is really scary. But I think it'd be even more healthier than taking, like, an ibuprofen, you know, as doing the Kratom. So I feel like
well, definitely, like, the reason I started taking Kratom in the first place was, like I said, I was still in pain. Had got off all the opiates, got off of alcohol, because I was using alcohol to like try to mask the pain. So after I was able to get off all of the opiates and booze, you know, I needed something for pain. So I was taking, I was on Dr. Drew's show, Loveline. And when I was on his show, he said, oh, you know, there's been this massive study done by the National Safety Council. And they say that if you take Advil and Tylenol in combination, it's actually more effective than using opiate painkillers. So I was like, there's no way. Like, I gotta look into that. So I went in, you know, went online, I looked into it, and of course I found this study, and there it was, like 4 out of 5 people preferred, you know, Advil and Tylenol over opiate painkillers, because a lot of people have adverse effects to them. So when I found out it was more effective to take that in combination, I started taking Advil and Tylenol in combination. But my pain level's so high that it wasn't like taking 1 Advil and 1 Tylenol a day. I was taking like 6 Advil, 6 Tylenol a day, or 8 Advil and 8 Tylenol a day. And that's a lot of pills for your liver to handle. My friend Justin called me from England. He's a bodybuilder over in England. And he said, hey, I just have to warn you. I heard you on this podcast talking about that. And I just had to warn you, I had a kidney transplant because of NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And so he had a kidney transplant, and Tom Prince, who's a bodybuilder, trains at Gold's, told me the same thing, that his doctors truly believe that his kidney transplant was kidney failure and subsequent transplant was due to these ibuprofen and, you know, Tylenol and Advil. And I think it's Advil mainly. Is the one that kills.
Yeah, my aunt actually.
Tylenol kills the liver. Advil kills the kidneys, and so through the ibuprofen. So when he called to warn me about the ibuprofen, I'm like, man, you know what? I have to get off of that too. There's no I already have fucked up liver and kidneys from drinking so many years. Mm-hmm. There's no way I can really subject myself to that. So I had to get off of that immediately, and the only thing left was a plant from Southeast Asia that's been around for 2,000 years that I didn't know was going to all of a sudden cause controversy. But, of course, like, every time I seem to take something, it causes controversy. It wasn't controversial until I started taking it.
There you go. Hey, I wish I had
Because you said you were taking it before me.
Yeah, well, I didn't know exactly what it was and the extent until I knew you're taking it as well. But I struggled with pain for the past 4 years because I had a chronic hip injury.
Yeah.
And my aunt actually had a kidney transplant from Advil. Wow. So, you know, I was always scared of taking that stuff, and so having the adverse effects from the medication and that. So, I mean, it's helped me dramatically.
Into anything else? Because the people that I know that, just a full disclosure of people that have had kidney, the people I know, they were heavy steroid users. Mm-hmm. They were also, I'm not saying that your aunt was, But they were steroid users, and they were also people that had used a lot of other drugs.
Yeah.
So it's like I kind of like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Everyone has their
Was your aunt
history.
like pretty strict, like pretty much just the?
It was just she. It was when my cousin was born, actually, and she was in the hospital, and so I was very young.
So
at
she
the
was
time.
she was
in a
sick
hospital, and she was just taking a bunch of Advil because of the pregnancy, something that happened
So yeah,
during
it's
labor.
mainly just
and
for that.
so because of that, her kidneys went into failure, and so she had a transplant, and she's.
So that sounds like she was just using it normal. Like,
it just was normal under supervision in the hospital too. So.
Yeah, I've heard that. A lot of people are there's some people are very susceptible to that, and then there's I always felt like I was indestructible because I would take I'd be popping pills like crazy, and then to hear that these people have had these like liver and kidney transplants, I'm like, man, the amount that I've taken, I'm so lucky that I don't have anything. And then I think that's another thing is and it's another thing like everybody should go get checked out. When I got out of rehab, the first thing I did was go get my blood work done and got checked for everything, liver, kidney, just everything, because I feel like we don't do that often enough anyway. And so that's another thing I just tell everybody to do is like just make sure you're healthy.
Oh, totally. I'm a hypochondriac, so every 6 months I'm like, okay, am I okay?
Yeah, check your blood and check everything.
Yes, totally.
Because we don't, it's like you don't know, and then like all of a sudden something sneaks up on you.
I know. I'm gonna be walking around with like tinfoil on my head. 'Cause I'm always paranoid something's gonna happen to me, or
I just know
I'm gonna
people
get
like
sick.
they're like, oh, I got my blood work done, and like my cholesterol's like 300, like it's something out of control, and you're like, dude, you need to check that more often because that's like pretty bad.
Oh, completely.
So I always feel like just even like little simple things like monitor your health, keep.
Oh yeah, and what's cool too. I know you're mentioning that you also have with your transformation, you're going into another project. About the ketogenic diet. So
yes, that was another thing I wanted to bring up. That sort of like where I was going with that was monitoring your health and getting healthy is like part of sobriety for me is being healthy overall. And in the beginning, I just got sober, and then. But while I was getting sober, while I was in rehab, I was doing a lot of working out. I was going to the gym a lot. But after rehab, I think it was more important to get on a daily schedule of training and eating. And so I did like a ketogenic diet, just kind of screwing around in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I had lost, it was pretty easy for me to just drop my weight down. Eating like really low carbs. So I had lost like, I don't know, like
you lost a lot of weight. So when I saw you that next time, I didn't even recognize you.
In the beginning, I lost like 40 pounds really fast.
Yeah.
And then for like a while, I just kind of went off. Like I didn't feel like doing it anymore. I was like, screw it. And I didn't even really know what I was doing. I was just kind of like, I was just eating no carbs. I wasn't really trying to eat high fat. I wasn't really trying to, And then I had a conversation with Ron from Quest. Mm-hmm. And we started talking about what they were doing with the dogs in the Keto Pet Sanctuary, and they're basically saving these dogs' lives with a ketogenic diet and all that stuff. And I started getting more into like the health effects of the ketogenic diet, and then I started just kind of like researching and learning more. But that one conversation sort of spawned like a lot, where I just was like, wow, this ketogenic diet that I've always been into, I just thought it was a weird thing that I was into that could get you lean. I had no idea that it could have all these health benefits. And when I found that it had all these health benefits, I decided that like, hey, that's something I want to do. I want to be the healthiest I can be. I want to be the healthiest person I can be. And so when I started doing research into keto, I thought for me, with all the health problems I do have, a big health problem for me was edema, where I'd get like a lot of swelling and stuff like that. And so a big part of getting rid of swelling is just getting rid of sugar and getting rid of like processed carbs, and that takes the swelling down a lot. So that got rid of a lot of swelling and inflammation in my body. Also, a ketogenic diet zaps the NLRP3 hormone, which is actually it's an inflammasome is what it's called, which just doesn't sound good to begin with. Inflammasomes are signalers that signal your body to produce inflammation. So when we get rid of that, we don't produce inflammation. So when we're eating a high-fat, low carbohydrate, moderate protein, ketogenic diet, we are basically positioning our body to not only burn fat over burning glucose, we're transitioning our body into being a fat-burning, machine, and we're also mitigating all these diseases and all these problems. Like they're showing really good promise in brain cancer, showing really good promise in the treatment of PTSD, in the treatment of diabetes, in treatment of all sorts of issues. It's been shown to help, and that's all we need to know, is that like something's been shown to help, and then we can study it more. And that's what's going on right now.
Right.
And that's what my next movie will focus on. It's called Keto Therapy, a Nutritional Intervention, and it's going to focus on all those therapies.
Right, and that's great. I'm really fascinated in learning about that, because it has been a big hype, and also helping with the cancer, especially the pets too. So I know.
Just want to make sure, like with stuff like this, that we're honest and we tell the truth. I think that it's really easy to get caught up in saying like, well, ketogenic diet can cure cancer, and it's like, slow down a little bit. Like there's a possibility of a lot of things, but we have to be honest and fair to the people that have suffered with those diseases and stuff like that. When we're trying to look for a cure, we can't rush it. We have to take our time and really examine it, and that's what I want the movie to do, because if it's bullshit and it doesn't help cancer, I want to say that too. I want people to know.